I'm not a complicated man. Name's Jack, 42 years old, and I work with my hands. Been doing it since I could lift a hammer without falling over. Built my own carpentry workshop from the ground up, a modest little place off the side of the house, nothing flashy, but solid. Smells like sawdust and coffee, like home. Folks in town know me as the guy who can fix a door that won't close right or build a table that'll outlive your grandkids. I don't drive a fancy truck, and I don't wear cologne that costs more than my boots. But I sleep fine most nights. Or, at least, I used to. 6 years married to Laura. She runs a boutique home decor business. Lots of pastels and overpriced ceramic chickens, the kind that end up on Pinterest boards and dusty bookshelves. She's sharp, too sharp sometimes. Walks into a room like she owns it. Which, far as she was concerned, she did. When we met, she was charming, a little sarcastic, full of stories about getting by as a single mom. I respected that. Thought maybe I could help. Maybe we could build something stable together. But stability, as it turned out, was all I ever got to bring to the table. Laura had 2 kids when we met. Max was 10, Ellie was 8. They're 16 and 14 now, and God help me, I've raised those 2 like they were my own. Soccer games, late-night school projects, broken hearts, broken bike chains. I was there for all of it. And what did I get in return? You're just good at fixing things, she'd say, sipping her latte while I was elbow-deep in a clogged sink. Or, at least you're reliable, like that was a consolation prize for being invisible. Max strutted around like a knockoff TikTok influencer. No manners, no respect, always too busy with his earbuds in to acknowledge the man who paid for his damn phone. Ellie wasn't much better. She had her mother's eye rolled down to a science and wielded sarcasm like a weapon. I used to think she'd grow out of it. I was wrong. They didn't see me as a father. Just the guy who picked them up when their real dad bailed again. The warm body with a wallet. But I stayed. Not because I was desperate. Not because I didn't have other options. I stayed because I made a vow, and for better or worse, I believed in sticking around when it got hard. I believed in showing up, even when no one clapped for it. Then came that night. It was a Wednesday. Always is, isn't it? Nothing special. I'd just come in from the shop, hands sore, back aching. Built a custom mantle for a retired teacher across town. She cried when she saw it. Said it reminded her of her childhood home. I wiped my boots before stepping inside. Respect, you know? I walked into chaos. Max yelling at Ellie over the last of the ice cream. Laura on the phone barking at a supplier, the dog barking just to feel included. I set down my lunchbox and headed to the kitchen. Figured I'd fix the hinge on that cabinet she'd been nagging about. No thanks, no glance, just another thing to check off the invisible to-do list. And then, like a match to gasoline, it all blew up. I don't remember what lit the fuse. Something about me forgetting to pick up organic oats. Not regular oats, organic. Max snorted and called me useless. Ellie chimed in that I was always in the way. And Laura? She turned to me, arms crossed, ice cold as marble. You're a convenient loser, Jack. That's all you've ever been. I only stayed with you so I didn't have to raise them alone. She said it like it was a weather report. Dry. Dismissive. In front of her kids. Like I wasn't even there. I looked at her. Really looked. And I didn't say a damn word. No yelling. No smashing plates or storming off. I just stood there, calm. Inside, something shifted quiet and final. Like the last click of a deadbolt. That was the moment. That was when I knew. She thought she'd won something with that line. But all she did was flip the switch. It's strange how clarity can come wrapped in silence. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was angry. No. Anger's noisy, messy. What I felt was something colder. Still. Like the way the air settles just before a storm. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan. Its slow, steady rotation seemed to mock me, endlessly spinning in place, doing what it was built to do, never questioning its purpose. I knew the feeling. You spend years trying to build something real, something lasting, and people start thinking you're furniture. Always there. Useful, but not noticed. I could count on one hand the number of times Laura had asked how my business was doing. And even then, it came with a thin-lipped smile and a follow-up like, have you thought about adding something trendier? Maybe rustic wine racks. She never understood what I did. Never cared to. Last year on my birthday, she forgot. Not just forgot to get a gift, forgot it was my birthday at all. I came home from the shop, hands splintered from sanding reclaimed pine, and she greeted me with a "Did you remember to grab almond milk?" Not a card. Not a cake. Not a mention. Later that same week, during a family dinner with her sister and brother-in-law, someone asked about my work. Laura jumped in before I could speak. "Oh, Jack? He keeps it simple. Just wood and glue, really." Then she laughed like it was charming. I smiled through it, chewing slow while her brother-in-law, who sells condos no one can afford, went on about real careers. That's what I was. Simple. Convenient. A utility wrapped in flannel. But that night, after she called me a loser, something shifted. Not just in my chest, but in the way I saw the whole layout of my life. It was like stepping back from a crooked bookshelf you've been ignoring for years, and finally seeing it's not just tilted, it's sinking through the damn floor. So I got up, quiet as a whisper, walked to the workshop. That place always knew who I was, even when no one else did. Smelled like cedar and truth. I laid out my tools. Not for a build. This wasn't about tables or chairs. It was muscle memory. Ritual. Clearing space in my mind. Then I pulled out an old duffel bag from under the workbench. Same one I used to take camping back before responsibility became a leash. I packed what mattered. 2 changes of clothes, my grandfather's folding knife, a leather-bound journal with a few blank pages, and a photo of my late father and me standing in front of the first workbench I ever built. He had one arm around me and a cigarette in the other. His smile said, "You can do anything if you know where to hit the nail." I left the rest. No goodbyes. No vindictive notes taped to mirrors. Just a single sheet of paper tucked into Laura's coffee mug, the one that said "Boss Babe" in pink letters. I figured it was fitting. The letter was short. "This isn't abandonment. It's release. You were never meant to carry me, and I'm done being dragged behind you like old luggage. I wish you peace, Jack." Before I left, I did a few technical things. Disabled the garage door from the inside. Locked the cabinet where the power tools lived. Set up automatic forwarding on all workshop payments. Clients would get their pieces. They just wouldn't get them from this house. And just like that, I severed the cords. No one stirred as I stepped into the cool blue haze of morning. Not even the dog barked. It was like the house already knew I was gone. I drove for 20 minutes, parked at the top of a hill just beyond the ridge near town. It was a spot I used to take Max and Ellie when they were little, before they decided I was the help. From up there, the house looked peaceful. You wouldn't know the rot unless you'd lived inside it. I stood for a while, hands in my jacket pockets, breathing, watching the sun break over the shingles like nothing had changed. Then I turned and walked away. The road north was empty. A 2-lane ribbon curling through fields gone yellow with time, lined by trees that had already started shedding their summer clothes. I didn't blast music, didn't take calls, just drove. Windows down, engine humming like it was glad to be going somewhere that wasn't home. The cabin sat near the edge of a forgotten lake, a few miles past the last gas station, where the map apps lose their nerve and signal fades to static. It used to belong to my grandfather. I hadn't been there in over 20 years, not since his funeral. Back then it had felt like a kingdom, small, sure, but whole. I remembered the sound of his boots on the porch, the way he whistled tunelessly as he chopped firewood, how his hands looked like they could bend steel and still thread a fishing hook with care. When I pulled up, it was exactly as I remembered. Just older. Sagging porch, moss creeping up the sides, a door swollen from years of weather. Most people would have turned around. But not me. Not anymore. I pried open the door and stepped inside. Dust hung in the air like memory. The furniture was covered in sheets, the kind that used to be white. I took one deep breath. Musty, but not ruined. Still standing. Like me. That first night, I slept on the floor in a sleeping bag with a half-empty thermos of coffee beside me and a stack of firewood I chopped earlier leaning like a loyal dog in the corner. No TV. No phone. No one telling me what I should be. Just silence. The good kind. In the mornings, I cooked eggs over a tiny propane stove and washed up in the lake. The water was cold enough to make you forget your own name, but it did the job. Lunch was canned soup or apples from a roadside stand. Dinner was whatever I had left. I wasn't hungry, not really. I wasn't feeding a body. I was feeding a soul that had been starving for years. Between meals, I worked. First came the roof, replacing shingles, patching leaks. Then the porch. The beams had rot in them, so I ripped them out and cut new ones. Every nail driven was like a reset button. No audience. No praise. Just the crack of the hammer and the slow return of my own rhythm. Evenings, I'd light a fire and sit by it with a cheap notebook I bought at the gas station. On the first page, I scrawled in blocky, uneven letters. Proof of life. Not a memoir. Not a confession. Just something to leave behind in case I disappear all the way. I wrote about everything: memories, moments, mistakes. Some entries were a few sentences. Others ran long, like the one about our first date, Laura and me. It was a little Italian place downtown. I remember how she laughed at something I said, something dumb, probably, and touched my arm like it meant something. She had that spark then. I think that's what drew me in. Not the beauty, though she had that, too. It was the way she lit up a room. Or maybe just how badly I wanted to be near the light. Then there was Max, 12 years old at the time. First time he looked me in the eyes and called me a nobody. Laura had scolded him, but gently. Like I was a guest they needed to placate, not the man who'd been making his lunch for 4 years. And that Christmas photo, the one they posted online, matching sweaters and hot chocolate mugs. I wasn't in it. Laura told me afterward, it was last minute, you were in the garage. Like I was part of the furniture. Like I'd made myself forgettable. Turns out, she was right. And that's what I leaned into. After a couple weeks, I started building again. Chairs. A bench. One end table carved with the silhouette of a pine tree. I took photos with an old digital camera I found in the cabin drawer, one I left years ago. No names. No locations. Just wood, angles, and hands that knew how to make something last. I uploaded the photos from a borrowed Wi-Fi signal at a diner 40 minutes away. Made a page under a fake name, North Bench Workshop. Simple. Quiet. Like me. People started liking the photos, asking questions, leaving comments. But no one knew who I was. No name. No backstory. No convenient loser. And that's exactly how I wanted it. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding either. I was rebuilding. Back home. Not that I'd call it home anymore. Things started to shift. Not all at once, but like the slow bend of a beam under pressure. You don't notice at first, until the ceiling starts creaking and the floor is no longer level. Laura had always been confident. Controlled. Lipstick sharp. Words sharper. She used to say, I built this life with my own hands. Funny thing, that. I was the one with the calluses. When I left, she barely noticed at first. I know her well enough to picture it, rolling her eyes, pouring her overpriced coffee into that pink Boss Babe mug, telling herself I was throwing a tantrum. That I'd come back once I cooled off. 1 week passed. Then 2. Then 3. No word. No note beyond the one I'd left. No calls. I shut off the phone I'd paid for. Canceled the shared bank cards. The silence wasn't an accident. It was a message. At first, she told people I was off finding myself, like I'd joined some midlife drum circle. Said it with a smirk, like she'd won something. Pathetic, really, she told her sister, who then told one of the moms at Ellie's school, who told half the PDA before the weekend. That's how it goes in those little suburban circles, judgment served in biodegradable cups. But while she was trying to spin a narrative, the reality was settling in. The bills started stacking. I used to handle the utilities, the trash service, the workshop side income that quietly padded her overdrafts. Turns out the lights don't stay on just because you've got good posture and a curated Instagram feed. Then the pipes started leaking because of course they did. Old copper, never replaced. I'd warned her a dozen times. She called a plumber, who quoted her $1,800 and didn't even show up on time. No more free repairs from the guy who just fixes things. Her boutique took a hit next. I'd been the one delivering her inventory, assembling furniture displays, handling last-minute shop fixes. When the vintage mirror shattered in her storefront and the replacement didn't show for a week, her best client left a review that read, unprofessional and disorganized. Beautiful things, but a mess behind the scenes. I wasn't the face of her brand. I was the backbone. And now, that spine was gone. The kids weren't making it easier. Max, sweet 16 going on parole, took the car without asking. Wrecked it into a stop sign 2 towns over. No injuries, thankfully. Just a crumpled fender and a citation. The insurance? Still in my name. The deductible? No longer magically covered. Ellie, not to be outdone, got herself internet famous for all the wrong reasons. Some video went viral of her mouthing off to a teacher, calling her a washed-up nobody with thrift store shoes. That apple didn't fall far. School called Laura in. Not for the first time. But this time, it made local news. The kind with red banners and comment sections full of fire emojis and insults. The walls were caving in, and no one was holding the beams. She tried texting my sister. Left a message on my old voicemail. Something about needing to talk like adults. But I wasn't interested in adult conversations with someone who spent 6 years treating me like a placeholder. You don't get to ask where the foundation went after you spent years chipping away at it. Then came the mortgage notice. Late payment. Red letters. She'd never handled it on her own. I used to pay it directly, automatic, never missed a month. One less thing for her to think about, she said. Now she had to think about everything. The truth is, I wasn't being cruel. I didn't wish her harm, but I'd done my part. For 6 years, I carried the load while being treated like a liability. Now, she was feeling the weight. Let it settle. Let her understand what was holding up the house all this time. I came back on the 31st day, not because I missed them, not out of some noble urge to mend what was broken. No, I came back because a month was just enough time for absence to settle into the bones of that house like cold. They say people don't appreciate the floor until it collapses. I was just there to show her the crack had become a chasm. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Didn't call ahead or send a dramatic warning text. I pulled into the driveway mid-afternoon. The sun was still up. Kids probably still in school, I figured. But as I stepped out of the truck, I heard yelling from inside, Max and Ellie, at it again. Something about laundry. Or maybe food. Or the internet. It all blends together when you're 16 and self-involved. The yard was a mess. Grass up to my knees, garbage tipped over and left that way. The wreath on the front door, some cutesy thing she'd bought from a home decor site, was half off the hook, swinging like a crooked smile. I knocked once. Didn't wait. I had a key, still. Not out of oversight, she just never thought to change the locks. Or maybe she thought I wouldn't have the nerve to use it. The moment I opened the door, the smell hit me. Sour laundry. Burnt toast. Dog hair. There were shoes scattered in the hall, a stack of dishes in the sink so high it looked like an archaeological dig. A lamp in the corner was missing a shade, and the bulb buzzed like it was giving its last breath. This wasn't the house I had left. This was what the house looked like without me. I stepped inside, slow, quiet. The kind of quiet that speaks louder than shouting. Laura was in the kitchen, hair tied up messily, still in what looked like yesterday's clothes. She turned around and froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Just a flicker in her eyes. Not fear. Not relief. Recognition. The kind that hits when you see the shadow of something you thought you'd buried. I'm here for my tools, I said. Not hello. Not how are you. Just that. She blinked. Swallowed hard. Jack. The kids must have heard my voice because Max peeked out from the hallway, then quickly disappeared. Ellie, too. They didn't say a word. I walked past her, boots thudding against the floor I'd installed myself 3 summers ago. The floor, she once said, felt too rustic. I stepped into the garage. It looked like someone had tried to find things, but didn't know what any of it did. Half-empty boxes, open drawers, a wrench on the floor. Like a child had tried to play builder and quit halfway through. I scanned the shelves. Took my time. Grabbed what mattered. The miter saw I'd saved months for. The custom chisels from my father's old set. A clamp kit I'd gotten from a retiring friend. I left behind the broken washing machine, the paint can she'd never learned how to open, and the socket set that was missing all the pieces she never bothered to return. Laura hovered in the doorway. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Just collapsed inward. You're really going to leave me like this? She asked, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. No venom. No superiority. Just a threadbare kind of panic. I stopped. Turned to face her. Let the silence breathe between us. I didn't leave you, I said, my voice calm. You threw me away. That hit her harder than any argument ever could. I saw it. The way her lips parted to speak, but no words came. The way her hands twitched at her sides like she wanted to reach out, but didn't know how. I walked past her, tools in hand, without another word. The screen door creaked behind me and clattered shut like punctuation. In the truck, I didn't look back. Didn't linger. Some people need silence to understand what they lost. I had given her 31 days of it. And from the look on her face, she was finally starting to hear it. I never was the type to make a scene. Never liked fireworks unless it was the 4th of July, and even then, I preferred the quiet kind that lit up the sky and faded without a bang. But I've learned there's power in a clean break, especially when it's done with the precision of a master cut. 2 days after I retrieved my tools, I drove to a quiet little law office just past the edge of town. Not one of those glossy, downtown firms with leather chairs and $10 coffee. This was the kind of place where the receptionist knew your name and the walls were lined with dusty books older than your mortgage. And sitting behind a cluttered desk was the man I'd been quietly consulting for 3 weeks already. Harold Barnes, 60-something, divorced twice, smiled like a man who'd seen the worst of humanity and still made it to the other side with his soul intact. He looked up from his file when I walked in. "Jack," he said, standing to shake my hand. "You ready to pull the trigger?" I nodded once. "It's time." We went through it all. Calm, methodical. "Grounds?" he asked. "Emotional abuse," I said. "Neglect. Alienation." I passed him a worn folder. He flipped it open, raised an eyebrow. Inside, timestamps. Photos of repairs I'd made, before and after shots. Screenshots of texts. Ones where she called me, the help, or told me to just be useful for once. Receipts I'd paid for out of pocket. A log of hours spent driving her inventory for her business, building shelves for her shop, even covering Max's car insurance when she forgot. Harold chuckled, shaking his head as he turned a page. "This is better documentation than most small claims cases I've seen." I didn't smile, just said, "I've always believed in clean work." "You'll get a fair shake," he said. "Actually, with this much evidence, you might get more than that. She's in for a surprise." He filed the paperwork. Quietly. No dramatic courier. Just the slow churn of legal machinery turning in my favor. Back at the house, the day the papers arrived was, fittingly, the day Laura decided she didn't need a plumber again. That's what I heard, anyway, from a neighbor who called me that evening just to say, "Man, I wish you could have seen her face." Picture it. Laura hunched over the kitchen sink, using a butter knife to pry a tangled hairball from the drain, still wearing those manicured nails she once said made her feel put together. The faucet was leaking, again, a puddle spreading at her feet. Then, the doorbell. She opened it expecting a package. Maybe one of her throw pillows from that influencer collab she kept tagging. Instead, she got served. Divorce papers. She laughed, apparently. Scoffed. Probably something like, "Finally grew a spine." But then she flipped to the back pages. The financial breakdown. The list of items I was claiming. And suddenly, it wasn't funny anymore. Because here's the thing. People like Laura don't just want control. They need the illusion that they're always 3 steps ahead. I was never 3 steps behind. She thought she could humiliate me, toss me aside, and I'd just wander off like an old mutt who'd finally learned not to bark. She never saw the ledger I'd been keeping. Not out of spite. Out of habit. Carpenters take measurements. We calculate, cut, document. Now she was seeing the invoice. Every unpaid labor. Every insult. Every overlooked contribution. The butter knife slipped, clanged into the drain. Fitting. Somewhere across town, Harold was probably sipping his black coffee and shaking his head at the audacity of it all. And me? I was back at the cabin. Fire crackling. Writing in the journal. She wanted a man who would disappear. I gave her one. And then I came back with receipts. It didn't take long for Laura to start weaponizing what she had left. The kids. She always knew how to spin a story. Could sell rain to a drowning man if she wore the right heels. And now, with the legal paperwork in her lap and her picture-perfect life crumbling like cheap drywall, she needed a new role to play. Victim. "She's telling everyone you abandoned us," Harold said over the phone. "That you stole from her. That you're trying to leave her penniless and ruin her business." "Of course she is," I said. "That's her furniture polish, guilt, and half-truths." I wasn't angry. I expected it. People like Laura don't apologize. They rewrite the story. And she started with the kids. Max showed up first. I was in the workshop, finishing a commission, hand-sanded walnut bench with dovetail joints tight enough to hold water. He came stomping in like a cowboy in a spaghetti western, all fury and zero direction. "You think you can just screw over my mom and walk away?" he barked, fists clenched, shoulders puffed. I didn't even look up, just wiped my hands on a rag, turned, and handed him a broom. "You want to talk?" I said, calm as a lake. "Earn it. Sweep the sawdust. Then we'll talk." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "I'm not your damn employee," he shouted, voice cracking. "You're trash. You're a coward." I nodded slowly. "Then go." He stood there another second, fist still clenched, like he thought he might take a swing. He didn't. Just stormed out, slamming the door so hard a chisel rattled off the bench. 5 minutes later, I got a text from Ellie. "You're the worst thing that ever happened to this family." Trash. No punctuation. Just venom on a touchscreen. I didn't reply. I just screenshotted it. Dragged it into a folder on my laptop titled Exhibit B. Harold said it was smart to document everything. I took that advice like I take my measurements twice to be sure. The kids weren't evil. Just lost. Confused. I couldn't blame them entirely. They were raised in a house where manipulation was a second language, where love had strings and truth had edits. But still, it stung. No point pretending it didn't. And yet, while that old life unraveled, something new was taking shape. Back in the cabin, on a hand-built desk under a window that faced the lake, I kept a laptop. No Facebook. No news. Just one bookmarked tab, North Bench Workshop. The anonymous blog I'd started, photos of furniture, little write-ups about technique, wood types, joints. Nothing flashy. Just honest craft. Turns out, people were hungry for that. A woman in Vermont messaged asking if I could replicate a shaker table she saw in a magazine. A guy in Montana wanted to buy 2 of the chairs I'd posted. Someone else offered to pay just to watch the process on video. Comments rolled in. Your work has soul. Whoever you are, this is art. Thank you for reminding me what real craftsmanship looks like. I didn't reply. Just nodded quietly and made a note of their orders in a new ledger. I was building again, not just furniture. A life. One plank at a time. And the world? It was starting to see me. Not as someone's afterthought or errand boy, but as a maker. A builder. A man with hands that tell the truth. Laura could smear my name in every conversation she had. Tell Max and Ellie whatever helped her sleep. I'd be over here with clean hands and solid wood. And receipts. Court day. A year ago, the idea would have twisted my gut. But now? It just felt like the end of a job well done. The final inspection before the keys are handed over. Laura arrived early, of course. She always did love a stage. She walked in wearing a power blazer and heels sharp enough to draw blood. Hair done. Lips painted. And on her arm, some midlife crisis boyfriend, all gym shoulders and no chin. The kind of guy who probably called himself an entrepreneur but didn't have a website or a job that survived past networking. They took their seats like royalty awaiting tribute. I walked in 10 minutes later, calm, clean-shaven. The same gray suit I wore to my brother's funeral 5 years back. Still fit, mostly. Shirt ironed. Tie straight. Nothing flashy. Just the look of a man who showed up to finish what needed finishing. Harold nodded when he saw me. You ready? He asked. I've been ready, I said. The room wasn't packed, but I saw them, Max and Ellie, seated behind their mother, faces blank. Not defiant. Not remorseful. Just waiting to see what would happen next. Still on her leash, even if it was fraying. When it was our turn, Harold stood. Calm, direct. Just like we practiced. He laid out everything. Line by line. Exhibit by exhibit. Financial records showing how I'd covered the mortgage, utilities, school fees, car insurance, all while Laura funneled business money into branding retreats and influencer collaborations. Screenshots of text messages, disrespect, gaslighting, veiled threats. Photos of furniture I built for her boutique, all unpaid labor. Receipts for supplies she never reimbursed. And then the killer, the prenup clause she'd forgotten about, the one voided by proven emotional manipulation and hostile living conditions. She scoffed when it started, smirked like the whole thing was beneath her. But the longer Harold spoke, the less she smiled. She started shifting in her seat, crossing and uncrossing her legs, whispering to her lawyer like they were playing a doomed game of catch-up. Then it was her turn. She took the stand like she was stepping onto a red carpet. First 5 minutes? Pure spin. He abandoned us. He was controlling. He didn't understand my ambitions. But under pressure? She cracked, snapped at Harold, interrupted the judge, talked over the court reporter, called me a freeloader in flannel, while half the courtroom stared in disbelief. Mrs. Carson, the judge said finally, this isn't social media. Please control yourself. She flushed red, bit her lip. But it was too late. The mask had slipped, and the judge had seen what lived underneath. When the gavel finally dropped, the ruling came down clean and hard. I kept the house. She'd get a payout, one she couldn't afford, not without liquidating her boutique's inventory or taking out another loan. I retained full rights to my workshop. Every tool, every client contract, every design. And then came the part that stunned even her. I was awarded half the equity in her business. Retroactive value from the labor, the logistics, the delivery work. All documented. All ignored. Until now. Laura's mouth opened like she was going to argue, but nothing came out. Not a word. The new boyfriend looked like he wanted to disappear into the bench. Max slouched. Ellie looked at the floor. And me? I stood. Buttoned my jacket. Nodded to Harold. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just steady. I walked past her without looking back, through the heavy doors and into the fresh air. The sky was clear. No thunder, no lightning, just sunlight and the sound of a storm finally passing. Viewers, this is the end of the story. We would be very grateful for your likes, comments, subscriptions, and sharing of our stories. See you next time.